During this orientation, we're going to cover the mission statement, the vision statement, strategies and goals for the organization, to talk a little bit about the organizational structure, to talk about the roles and responsibilities of the different positions of chair and vice chair, secretary and treasurer, and to talk about the clergy community partnership. And to begin the discussion of what are the next steps that will happen over the next few months. So when I first started to do the project, I wanted to give a unique name to the work that I was going to do over the 3 months. And I came up with the Black LGBT Faith Initiative. The other name that we came up with in the process of creating the project was Citywide Coalition. So I just wanted to say a note that if the group itself decides that you want a unique name or a different name, then that's fine, and that'll be part of the strategic planning in the future. The vision of the Citywide Coalition is the full inclusion of LGBT people of African descent into our places of worship. So that's a larger goal, a larger vision. And the idea is that we should be able to go into any worship space that's ours and not feel like we have to be afraid that someone from the pulpit is going to call our lifestyle sin or make us feel ashamed. So that's the long-term goal. And it's not that our group has to complete it on its own. It's just that we will be part of the work that's already being done around this issue. The mission is going to be more about how do we create this, how do we accomplish the vision. And so there's a twofold mission. One is to create strategies to partner with African American clergy within these churches to try to create spaces that are liberating and affirming. And the other one is to address the social issues that affect LGBT people of color from a faith-based perspective. And we've added through advocacy, activism, and public education. So in order to make change, we wanted to go on the inside, but we also realized that attitudes and behaviors have to change on the outside as well. So moving on to strategies. So we're going more from the broad, from the lofty to the more specific, sort of like a to-do list when you go into the strategies. And the organization is going to be new, so you're not going to be able to do all of these things right away. You also will have to build so that there can be people who can assist the organization in doing some of these things. But here was a list of what I felt might be some good strategies for achieving the missions and the goals that we talked about already. The first is to meet regularly. And initially, a plan was created to meet monthly. I think initially you should meet in person, and then after that you can begin to meet on over the phone. Just because I think it helps with building a sense of community when you meet together for the first time, and just meeting over the phone sometimes is difficult to really communicate. It can get messy if you start over the phone. So I would try, even though it's really hard to get schedules together, to have your initial meetings be in person once a month. The clergy community partnership I'll explain more later. Basically, it's a way to connect with people who are involved in the church, to train them, and to have them be part of the process, part of helping with making change from the inside. Dissemination of information can be online. You can have a listserv. You can have email. There might be a web page or a blog. Just trying to have a way to get the information out to the community and people who don't live in the New York City area. Definitely workshops and forums in collaboration with faith leaders of African descent. And then later, these next two things, I thought would be really good to have to be. So, a lot of the time with community activism, we are responding to problems. With policy analysis and research, we are saying we understand the connection between the homophobia that's in the church and the social issues. And so what we would be doing what would be to get ahead of the problem and teach other organizations how to handle some of the social issues, like, for example, the LGBT homeless youth. If we get together and figure out a way to help churches address that, we could be in the forefront of that struggle, as opposed to responding to issues that come up as they come up. The next thing is training and technical assistance for clergy. As I was saying at lots of different meetings, I attended a divinity school where many young African American clergy were being trained in a liberal theology, but felt like they could not bring that liberal theology to the churches that they would serve. They felt like they might lose their jobs or their ability to work if they brought a liberal theology to a church. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if these clergy had some support from an organization like the Citywide Coalition? So I was hoping that your organization could provide training for clergy, but also technical assistance, maybe someone to work with a clergy person over time to support them as they try to help make their churches more open and affirming. The policy analysis and research and training and technical assistance is going to need funding so that you can bring trainers in. So we'll talk about funding a little bit later in the training. And this last one I just thought would be a perk. Sometimes it's good to have some sort of perk or benefit for the people who are involved in the work. So I thought one thing we could do is to get a little bit of money, raise a little bit of money so that each participant in the coalition could have some professional development opportunities, maybe can have some different trainings or national conferences that they could attend, something that would be sort of a perk for people who want to be part of the coalition. And also, there's organizations like GLAD, for example, who offer organizations trainings, as a group. So there's GLAD has a media training, and a number of organizations have media training. So maybe going together as a group to train would be another way to build a community within the organization itself. So throughout the contract that I've had with the Faith Leaders of African Descent, we've had lots of conversations about how we would do this work and what kind of work we would do. And what I tried to do here was to condense everything into 5 points. So the first point is that we want to connect with Black senior pastors and associate pastors, mothers and lay leaders of the church, and also maybe some specialized ministries like health ministry, youth ministry, and HIV/AIDS ministries. So this is the most important work of the organization, is beginning to form a relationship with people who are who are leaders inside of the Black churches, the ones that are not necessarily known for being open and affirming, not the hostile ones right away, but just ones where maybe there's a conversation already starting, and so we want to make some kind of headway any kind of way we can. And so part of the process is going to be figuring out creative ways to connect with these people and begin having a conversation. The second thing is, like I was saying earlier, about being a support for Black clergy, providing trainings, technical assistance, and capacity building, coalition building and community building. And like I said, we're going to talk about the clergy community partnership later, but doing community forums, having educational workshops, and I think a lot of that work will go hand in hand with the work that already is being done by the LGBT faith leaders of African descent. The third part was about being visible and vocal. So eventually, as the work begins, the group would be the folks that the press would come to for a quote on different issues. So this part of the project would have to be built. We would have to begin making connections with people in the media and becoming known for being the experts on this particular issue, on the issue of um, social problems within the African American community where the LGBT people are in the majority. And we're saying we want to address this from a faith-based perspective. So we're reaching to be the experts on these topics. And the first topic we're going to talk about is LGBT youth homelessness, which is a perfect way to get started, I believe, in this particular issue. The fourth point is about articulating a faith-based response to social issues. So, for example, with the LGBT youth homelessness, we would create white papers and write about the issue and just try to become, it goes along with the third point, to do some research and do some writing that makes us, that establish the group as experts on the issue, whatever the issue is. And then fifth is being a liaison between African American religious organizations and nonprofits. So some of the social issues that would be addressed, for example, violence in the LGBT community or homelessness or whichever issue is being addressed at the time, most likely there are one or a number of nonprofit organizations, and so the group itself could be a liaison bringing together the community activists who already are doing the work in the churches. So it would involve connection, like point number one, connection with the pastors and the people in the church, but it also would involve connecting with people in nonprofit organizations and activists. When we first began having a conversation about the Citywide Coalition, we thought there should be two tiers or two different parts of the group. There would be one group that was smaller, that would serve as an advisory committee to the larger group. And so I've called it an advisory board, and I've recruited people specifically to be part of an advisory board. This group is going to be smaller. I tried to bring in people who have a national or global perspective to the work that the coalition is doing. They're not going to meet as often per year, and they're going to be to work as a support for the other part, the Citywide Coalition. So the Citywide Coalition is made up of a larger group of people, maybe between 12 and 15, maybe getting no larger than 15, who are working more hands-on. They're the group that's getting together once a month. They're going to figure out all the strategies to figure out what to do, to meet with the clergy, and that group is going to do more of the hands-on work. So that group is being asked to meet once a month. But then as I was working, I realized that there needed to be a larger base. So as the Citywide Coalition begins to reach out to people through workshops, through trainings, we would have a group of people who were excited about the work that we do. Maybe they don't necessarily want to be on the coalition, but they were connected somehow. So I named it the Clergy Community Partnership. because I think it'll be made up of clergy, but also lay leaders and people who just want to be part of a workshop or a training. And this is going to be the base. So this group can be as large as it wants to be. We're going to need to figure out a way to connect them, maybe through email blast or through a newsletter or some kind of way to keep them connected to the organization. But this is going to be the larger base that that supports the work. If there's a protest, they will be the ones you call to say, let's all meet up here and protest this together. Letter writing, different campaigns. So this is like the base of the organization. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the roles and responsibilities of some of the different positions, just briefly. The first thing is that there needs to be, after my contract ends, there needs to be a coordinator. Who I think at the beginning someone can volunteer to do this work, but eventually it would be good to have a bit of grant money to pay someone to be an administrative coordinator for the organization. The faith leaders of African descent can also help out to a certain extent, but this person would be responsible mostly for scheduling the meetings, figuring out meeting space, time, if there's any needs like coffee or food, if the group does something with another organization, trying to be the liaison between that organization and the group. So that this first thing is very important at this point, especially as my contract is ending and I won't be able to do it as much anymore. A chair is someone who is in charge, or really a better way to put it is responsible for what is going on in the organization. I believe that the chair should be concerned about the vision of the organization and keeping that in mind. There's a lot of ideas that could be generated, and I think the chair would be responsible for saying or for deciding, is this in line with our vision, or is this something that's another group's ideas, or something that we can work with another group on. So that's what I think is the most important thing about a chair. The vice chair basically is the person who, in the absence of the chair, can take over the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. The chair also is responsible for running the meetings. The vice chair can be there for the chair if the chair for some reason isn't available. And also on the chair, I was saying that maybe you can have co-chairs. Sometimes it's hard to have one person have all the responsibility. The secretary essentially it's very important to have someone who takes notes at the meetings and develops the minutes, but also the agenda. And the role of the secretary can become more expansive as you get bigger. There might be more documents or those kinds of things. So the secretary would either create they would either create the documents, or they would be responsible for coordinating whomever was working on that. And then also with the treasurer is going to be responsible for the financial health of the organization. And the treasurer may or may not do everything, but they are going to be responsible for everyone who's working on the financial aspects of the organization. In the meantime, so there should be at some point elections, and I put the word quorum. Basically, you want to make sure you have enough people at your meeting or at your event where you vote, to make it fair. So you want to make sure that there's enough people in the room when you do your vote. But before then, I'm trying to appoint someone or two people to be an acting chair until you can have a formal election, because then that person can work with me on moving the organization forward over the next few months. So I will let you know as soon as I can who's been appointed as the acting chair or the acting co-chairs. And then as soon as you can, you should have a formal election. As it was mentioned before, one of the most important jobs of this organization is to work with the churches, is to get inside the churches and help to make changes from within while we also do work from outside the churches. So the wording in the contract was to create a cadre of informed allies inside houses of worship. So I think that the clergy community partnership idea is designed to try to create a base of support within the churches. So the purpose is to build a broad base of support within the houses of worship, both the traditional black churches and also churches that are known to be open and affirming. We're going to recruit members through actions and trainings and one-on-one connections. These connections might be formal, but there may also be maybe people we meet along the way as we're doing the work who just say, hey, I belong to such and such church, and can then become someone who helps us understand how to get into that church, what's the best way, are there different auxiliaries that are working on something, or should we go directly to the pastor? So that person will have an inside idea about the churches, and then we can work on that little at a time. So the members of the partnership will extend the work by continuing to create safe spaces within their own churches. So ideally, as we create a training and go into the churches and train clergy people and lay leaders and people in the congregation, we're hoping that those people will then take some of the principles that we talked about back into their own churches, and through that, we will expand the work that's being done inside the churches, making the churches different and safer for LGBT people. In the fourth bullet, this is the idea about having a group of people. So we have to have some kind of way to connect with them, to have them become part of something where they feel connected to the Citywide Coalition. And if we are going to have a political action or attend events, that these will be people we can count on to show up in number, to protest or to do some sort of political action if that's something that happens. And then finally, these people might be a way we can connect with senior pastors. So maybe eventually there may be a conversation where one or two of the Citywide Coalition members go and talk to a different senior pastor, and the people in the clergy community partnership were the ones that helped figure out what's the best way, what work has already been done, has there been resistance in the past. These kinds of things would be helpful in terms of information. So this is the overview for the clergy community partnership, just the beginning ideas, and hopefully this can be developed into a training, into a feeling of partnership or community building practice. And also, like I said earlier, a unique name can be given to it. This is just sort of like a generic name, just so that I could express what I think needs to happen in terms of this goal. I call this the money slide because this is where the fundraising this is the slide that explains why fundraising needs to happen right away. First of all, I think it's good to raise a small amount of funds to get started, because then when you go for larger opportunities, the larger people who provide larger opportunities like the idea that you've had some other organizations support what you do. In terms of what we would do with the funds is to bring in a consultant to do some more grant writing and to do some strategic planning to help you with to further shape the vision and mission, um, to help you come up with unique names, to help you feel like a group. So there are consultants who are professionals who are very good at this work, um, and it would be good to have a little bit of money in the beginning to get that work done because that's going to be very important right away. I believe that the people who are going to be in the organization are taxed and busy, so it would be too much to ask members of the coalition to do the training for the clergy and the community workshops and all that work. So if you could get a little bit of money together, you could hire professionals who could offer the training, technical assistance, facilitate workshops, and that kind of thing. Next, you would need some administrative help. One thing I looked into was trying to work with interns at Union Theological Seminary. There are requirements, but I think that because so many people in either the Faith Leaders of African Descent or the Citywide Coalition are professors and clergy people, that the organization will meet the requirements for an internship. So this is one way. Undergrads also, you can utilize their help with work study. There's also volunteers, so there's ways around it. The first part of the administrative help was around doing research, maintaining a blog and different things like that. I think would be just perfect for a student. And then also just coordinating the meetings and keeping people together and that kind of thing would be a really helpful thing to have to set up as soon as possible. And then also the discussion needs to happen about whether this organization is going to become its own 501c3. That is a broader discussion that needs to happen with the Faith Leaders of African Descent. But in the meantime, grants can happen because the Faith Leaders of African Descent are already a 501c3, and this organization can use that base organization as a fiscal conduit to get grants. So you're in a good position um, to get grants. So what I was going to offer was to help as a volunteer for the next few months to find that small grant to get this started, and then from there, maybe you can hire someone to do more of look for larger grant opportunities. In closing, I just wanted to reiterate that you can contact me with any thoughts and questions, and I'm going to try to put together a phone conference, so we can talk about these issues. I want to thank you for being part of the Citywide Coalition from whatever you are contributing to the work. I think the work is very important. I think it's timely. I think the nation is waking up to the issue of faith and sexuality, and I think that this is going to be a great success. So I'm looking forward to hearing about it in the future, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this presentation. Thank you so much.